18 points, that is the margin. Against the team every analyst in this league has already handed the 22-6 WNBA Championship to before a single regular season game tips off. And Indiana did it without Aliyah Boston on the floor, without Lexie Hull in uniform, with Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham playing their first meaningful basketball in months after their bodies spent most of 22-5 refusing to cooperate. That is not a preseason game you scroll past and move on from. That is a statement about where this league's power structure might actually be heading. Here is what happened at Barclays Center in Brooklyn, and why the championship conversation around 2026 just became significantly more complicated. Caitlin Clark stepped onto a New York Liberty home floor, faced a defense specifically designed to pressure her into mistakes, and walked away without giving them a single turnover, 0. In 17 minutes, against full-court pressure, against a squad that came out with a scheme built to make Clark feel like 2025 never ended, and Sophie Cunningham, returning on a knee that had a structural Mikael tear in it less than a year ago, went for 14 points in 13 minutes on 3 clean three-pointers. Indiana won 109-91, and the Liberty's preseason championship narrative just developed some very serious cracks. If you have been waiting to find out whether this Indiana roster was truly rebuilt or just rebuilt on paper, you are in exactly the right place. Hit that like button right now, because what we are about to break down today goes much deeper than a single box score. Let's start with what Clark actually went through to get to this game, because a lot of the coverage around her return has glossed over just how bad 2025 actually was. Clark played 13 games in 2025, not 13 strong games out of a full season, not 13 before a precautionary shutdown at the end of the year. 13 total, because her body kept sending her back to the training room over and over, while the season moved forward without her. The quad went first, then ankle issues compounded the problem before she ever got properly right, then a groin injury in July finished off whatever was left of her year, then a groin injury. 3 separate problems, stacking on top of each other, each one interrupting a recovery that was already underway. That kind of progression creates a specific form of psychological damage that a single serious injury does not. The cycle of coming back and being sent back out kept compounding in ways that a single clean injury would not have produced. There is no shortcut through that experience. You cannot simply decide to trust a quad that kept failing you or push off an ankle you spent weeks protecting. The physical clearance and the mental clearance are two completely separate milestones, and athletes frequently achieve physical readiness long before they have rebuilt trust in their own body under competitive conditions. Sophie Cunningham's situation was structurally different but equally demanding. Her Mikael tore in 2025, and that was the full stop. Season done. No ambiguity about a return timeline because the answer was simply not in 2005. But a Mikael tear does something specific to a shooter's mechanics that extends beyond the recovery window itself. It changes the fundamental movement patterns that basketball requires. How you plant your foot coming off a screen, how you cut toward the ball, how you load your legs before releasing a rhythm three-pointer. Cunningham's entire offensive game runs through exactly those movements. She plays on the arc, coming off curls, catching and firing before a defensive closeout can arrive. Every single one of those actions requires her knee to respond instantly and without any compensating hesitation. She spent the better part of a year retraining that knee to do what she was asking of when she posted from New York before tip-off, saying she had been dying to say it was finally game day and that feeling healthy felt huge. That was not routine preseason excitement. That was 11 months of rehabilitation work trying to speak for itself. Coach Stephanie White watched Clark through every stage of the recovery process, and what she said post-game is worth listening to carefully. By the time the 2006 preseason arrived, Clark carried herself differently. The joy was visible from the sideline, a player moving with genuine confidence instead of one still testing herself carefully with every possession. If you understand basketball well enough, you know why that shot is so diagnostic. A floater is touch. It requires the quad to fire correctly, the ankle to be fully stable, the momentum to be controlled, and the timing to hold. It is among the first things that disappear when a player's body is not fully cooperating, and Clark's floater dropped clean. The recovery stopped being a narrative and became a confirmed fact in real time. From there, 17 minutes, 7 points, 4 assists, 3 rebounds, 0 turnovers. The Liberty came in with full-court pressure specifically designed to force quick decisions and bad passes from a player who had not competed at this level since her injury spiral shut her down, and Clark gave them nothing. White described it post-game as Clark playing with great intention in everything she did. The 0 turnovers is the number that demands the most attention. A player returning from this kind of extended layoff typically plays one of two ways, either pulling back cautiously to protect herself or pushing aggressively to prove she is back. Clark did neither. She ran the offense, found the correct play each time down the floor, and never once got sped up by the pressure New York was throwing at her. That is not just physical health, that is processing clarity. That is a player who came back completely, not tentatively. That is a player who came back completely, not tentatively. Then she hit the three, the step-back pull-up deep three, and Indiana's fan base exhaled everywhere at once. That particular shot was the quiet fear nobody wanted to say out loud, that the deep pull-up range might not come back fully clean after months of protecting a bad ankle and managing a sore quad. Clark finished 1 for 5 from deep overall, but she noted post-game that her misses were running long. Her legs are fully under her. She is simply recalibrating her feel for distance, which is exactly what you want to hear from a shooter in week 1 of the preseason. The setting matters as context too, because Indiana did not walk into a depleted or disorganized opponent. The New York Liberty entered 2026 with the kind of roster construction that tends to end preseason debates before they start. Jonquel Jones, Brianna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu. Multiple analysts had already written them in as 2026 champions before the preseason even opened, and Indiana walked into their building shorthanded. Aliyah, Boston managing a lower leg issue, not in uniform. Lexie Hull dealing with hamstring tightness, watching from the bench instead of contributing minutes. White confirmed after the game that both would have dressed if the contest actually counted. It did, so Indiana went into Brooklyn with a shorter rotation, 2 injured returners playing their first competitive minutes in months, and still won by 18 points. The bench scored 62 points against the Liberty, against a team built with the length, the talent, and the defensive awareness to make 62 bench points feel like a theoretical number rather than an actual one. The question entering this game was whether Clark was truly back and whether Cunningham's knee would hold up against real competition. Both of those questions got answered clearly, but the bigger revelation from Barclays Center might actually be what this entire roster did when given 40 minutes of real competition. 62 bench points against a super team is not a number you rationalize away with small sample logic. Indiana's reserve unit did not pad stats against a Liberty team that had already conceded the game mentally. Shatori Walker-Kimbrough's 9 points came specifically during a 21-4 fourth-quarter run that created the final decisive separation. That kind of sustained run requires collective defensive intensity from everyone on the floor, not just one player catching fire on offense. Indiana's bench built that run from the defensive end first, and then finished it on the other side. Drop your prediction in the comments right now. Do you actually think Indiana can take the 2026 championship away from the Liberty when the regular season begins? The conversation has shifted dramatically after Barclays Center, and I want to know if this game moved your preseason pick. Sophie Cunningham's contribution deserves its own careful analysis. 14 points in 13 minutes on 3 three-pointers. If you understand what a McEltier does to a shooter's mechanics at the structural level, those numbers translate into something considerably bigger than a strong preseason game. Less than a year before she stood on that floor at Barclays Center, Cunningham's knee had a structural tear in it. The first 3 dropped clean, the second one dropped clean, the third one dropped clean. Each one was a physical confirmation in real time that the retraining she put in since January actually held when it was tested against live competition. Clark's return dominated every broadcast intro, every social media post, every pregame narrative leading into tip-off, and then 2 other players went out and tied for the team's scoring lead. Kelsey Mitchell posted 18 points on 7 of 12 shooting in 17 minutes, not hunting, not forcing anything, making the right play repeatedly and letting the points arrive naturally from a system that rewards correct decisions rather than volume hunting. Walker-Kimbrough also finished with 18, with her most significant contribution coming during the fourth-quarter run that ended any remaining suspense. Her scoring in that stretch did not come from isolation creation. It came from Indiana's defensive pressure converting Liberty possessions into transition opportunities, with Walker-Kimbrough filling the lane and finishing what the defense created. Michaela Timpson added 11 points off the bench. Justine Pasa, a 6'4" shooter still working her way into a full 1B role, put up 8 points while flashing the kind of range from the perimeter that creates a specific defensive problem in pace and space systems. A 6'4" player who can pull up from deep forces opposing defenses to assign a perimeter-capable defender to someone they would normally try to body up or switch under. When Indiana runs multiple players of that size and range simultaneously on the arc, the defensive rotations multiply in complexity with every action. Opposing coaches now have to add Pasa to their scouting preparation in a way they did not have to before this game. That is a concrete roster development, not just a box score curiosity. Before we go further, if this kind of roster-level breakdown is what keeps bringing you back to this channel, consider supporting us by becoming a member. Your support is what makes it possible to keep going this deep on every story that actually matters in the league right now. Raven Johnson requires her own dedicated section, because what she produced in 17 minutes of floor time speaks directly to the structural question every opposing coach will be asking about Indiana this season. 8 assists. It is a precise biomechanical description of how she physically accesses passing lanes that standard-sized guards simply cannot reach. Her length converts New York's half-court sets into Indiana transition opportunities before the Liberty even processes that the ball is gone. And when Clark sits, Johnson runs the second unit at the same pace and the same defensive intensity. The tempo does not drop, the pressure does not ease. Indiana does not reset and wait, they just keep going. This is where White's stated tactical vision becomes visible as a real structure, rather than a preseason talking point. The Liberty game was the first external test of whether the personnel she assembled could actually execute that vision for 40 minutes against real competition. 32 points in the first quarter, 29 points generated off 24 New York turnovers, 8 blocks as a team. The Liberty's full-court pressure scheme was designed to disrupt Indiana's offensive flow and force Clark into uncomfortable decisions early. Instead, Indiana's active defense converted New York's half-court possessions into fever-fast breaks so repeatedly that the Liberty were scrambling to keep up by the end of the first half. If this analysis has been your go-to for understanding what is actually happening with Indiana this season, share this video right now with someone still treating the fever as a secondary story. The championship conversation just shifted, and people need to see the evidence behind it. Monique Billings was a specific mechanical reason. The front court could run at that speed. She and Walker-Kimbrough are not traditional bigs who secure a rebound and wait for the play to develop. Billings runs the floor rim to rim, and her hands are clean enough that Clark can deliver the ball to her in full stride without slowing the transition pace to let her catch up. 9 points, 7 rebounds. The Clark to Billings connection in transition gave Indiana an early offensive rhythm that New York's defensive rotations never consistently disrupted. That is a different kind of front court than most teams are building, and it showed up in the score. Here is what should actually concern the Liberty as they go back to film review. The Indiana roster that beat them by 18 points was not at full strength. Aliyah Boston will return into a rotation that already functioned at a high level without her. Lexie Hull will add another floor spacer capable of running in transition and stretching the defense from the wing in exactly the way pace and space systems need. Indiana's offense does not change when those two return, it deepens. The system White built does not have a slow gear, and it is not yet operating with its full complement of personnel. What the Liberty saw at Barclays Center was Indiana's floor. The ceiling has not been fully revealed yet. Pull back and look at the complete picture from one preseason game. Indiana beat the predetermined 2026 WNBA champions by 18 points without 2 rotation players in uniform. Clark produced 0 turnovers in 17 minutes under a defensive scheme built specifically to generate exactly that. Raven Johnson made the Liberty's half-court offense look disorganized from the guard position. 29 transition points came directly from 24 New York turnovers, with the defense creating the offensive opportunities rather than waiting for them. The Liberty's length and defensive awareness were supposed to be the answer to Indiana's pace. They were not the answer on this night. The question this game answered is no longer whether Indiana can compete at the championship level. The question this game opened is how far this roster goes when every player is healthy and the regular season is actually on the line. Before the Barclays Center game, the 2026 WNBA Championship conversation started and ended in New York. After this game, Indiana is a legitimate part of that discussion, and it takes real intellectual effort to argue otherwise. 2 preseason games remain, April 30th at home against Dallas, then May 2nd against the Nigeria women's national team, before the regular season opens and everything counts. Each one is another opportunity for Clark and Cunningham to build competitive rhythm, for White to sharpen the rotations that will matter in a 7-game playoff series, and for this group to develop the chemistry that separates a talented roster from a cohesive one. Subscribe right now and turn on all notifications, because the Indiana Fever are going to be one of the defining stories of the 2026 WNBA season, and we are covering every development as it unfolds. Click the video on screen next. We're going even deeper on something most people are completely overlooking about this roster heading into the regular season. Do not miss it.